Michael?
G'day, Jake.
G'day, mate.
How you going?
Ripper.
All right, Penance. What a film.
Well, yeah, it's an eye-opener for some people, that's for sure.
Yeah. Tell me, what were the true events that inspired it?
Well, I actually used to live in Australia, and so and I went back recently. I've been in LA for 8 years now, and I was in Sydney for 5 years before that. That's kind of where I discovered that I wanted to make film. I transitioned out of advertising and media and all that stuff. I did that in London for many years. And so I went back probably about 3 years ago,
right,
for a trip, and it was front page of, I think it was the Sydney Morning Herald, about this gynecologist, or the OBGYN, or whatever you call them over there, who had been outed by the press for all these horrendous crimes he did in his time, 10 years or something, against women, against hundreds of women. And I read about it, and, didn't publish much information, but I thought, what a horrible thing to have happen to you if you're a woman, because he's talking about removing labia, removing clitorises, and doing this maliciously against these women, and they didn't even know about it until they woke up, and and it just got kind of buried by the system, and this guy never got caught. And I've read in my research, I've read cases in the UK which are very similar to cases here in America, but that's the one that caught my eye, and I just let it. It's one of those things you put in your box of horrible things and interesting characters, or horrible characters and interesting things, whatever.
Yep.
And then when I came to write the script for Penance, or the film that ultimately became Penance, I was like, okay, I kind of want to go down this road of, I've got to, as an independent filmmaker, create something that's going to be easy to shoot, relatively cheap, kind of limited locations, and I'm going to come up with a bad guy. I know I want to make it about, I'm trying to make it as commercial as possible. So I made it about strippers and in the horror genre. And so the whole point of view camera thing was picking up, and I liked that idea as a way of shooting just with a digital camera, really, but making it look good, but not people realizing it looks good. So anyway, I came up with this character and kind of built the story around the events of the stripper and the bad guy, and sort of kind of that's how it went from there. So it's a found footage film, I guess. So how much did other found footage films influence it? Well, classically, Blair Witch, of course, was the first thing that came to mind. So it was kind of based on that idea of the found footage. Cloverfield was, I just watched that at the time, and I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And you do a bit of this and a bit of that. And then, Children of Men, although not found footage, I love the style that was, kind of the long takes. And so that's kind of what I wanted to bring in or implement in terms of a cinematic style into the production of the film. So obviously, so it's not just running around thoughtlessly with the camera. There is some kind of trying to create some kind of cinematic style at the same time, like in Children of Men. So so those are the kind of the areas that the influences in terms of style of film that I drew from for this.
It's also sort of a collision with some sort of woman in prison film too, don't you think?
Oh, yes, of course. Sorry, I forgot. I absolutely forgot. One of the other films that maximally influenced me in a maximum way about this was it was a cross between, the film was, in the style of a found footage, but there's a film called, oh, God. It's a woman in prison, an English film.
Yeah.
It was about two judges, English judges, who took these young women from the streets, it was during the 60s and 70s, these loose women, and they took them into this prison, and they imprisoned them and tried to cleanse them of their sins because they were acting immorally in society, and they were all locked up, and ultimately the ultimate cleanse was their death. And that's kind of where I took the idea for this film, the found footage mixed with this film. And then ultimately, I wanted to create it kind of in the style or the feel of Wolf Creek, an Australian film. You know how that walks you down the road of happiness and fun, and they find this guy, he helps them out, and they go down, and then they get drugged, and they kind of wake up, and they're in another world, the bad place. And so in Penance, I wanted to kind of create that journey of our character. You know, strippers, happy, boobs, fun, and then an event happens, and they go along, and then they sort of go into this world, and it's still weird but happy. And then Michael Rooker turns up and shoots Will, and ultimately has the confrontation with the women, shoots the character, and from that gunshot, they're in that other world of hell, kind of a new world of hell. So that's kind of what I wanted to do there as well.
The title, where does the actual title come from? Because it's unclear. Whose penance are we actually going through?
Right. Well, it's really, the idea is that the our lead character, Graham McTavish, is, he wants to head to the other world, but he wants to be forgiven for his sins, and he feels that if he helps these women now, by preventing them from, going through, what's it called, purgatory, then and if he makes that journey easy, in other words, if he creates a living hell for them so that the purgatory is kind of avoided, then he'll be there and they will guide him through into the gates of heaven. It's kind of a fucked up plan. Obviously doesn't work, but that's his ideas. So he's asking for not only for their penance, or trying to help create their penance, but for his too. That these women will ultimately pay their penance for their sins, as will he, and he did.
That's interesting. It's got a really Catholic spine to it, but it's not a very Catholic horror film. I mean, it's pretty freaky, and it really does step down the Wolf Creek way of disintegration.
Well, yeah, that was absolutely my goal, is to create that disintegration, and obviously there are some extreme moments of violence in the film, and that was intentional. At the time we made it, it was all the rage, and I was really trying to. Even had a distribution offer where they wanted to take those moments out, but I stood by my guns and said no. I want to kind of don't want the film to just fall into the background of mediocrity or into the realm of mediocrity. I want to really have a film that people are going to sit back and go, fucking holy shit, I just can't believe I saw that. And then it sort of finds its place based on that. Maybe it'll get a lesser, well, actually, time has shown that it got a smaller audience as a result, or at least certainly in this country. Would I do it differently? Probably not, because I stood by my creative roots here. Would I make the same film again today? No, probably not. But at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do.
Why not? Why wouldn't you make it again?
Well, because I think the market for these films has kind of dropped off, after the 08 crash, the appetite for, lower budget, hostile gore films, the market for the horror, the DVD market, certainly for horror films, kind of dropped off a cliff. So, it comes down to the distribution model. People just aren't buying these films, and therefore the distributors aren't buying them. They want tentpole names, and, even though I try to create that with some of the actors I have in there, it's still, it's still very hard to sell this film now if I made this now. So, people want more action thriller with a name, and, and if you can do that, then you're more likely to because now if I was to do it, I'd really focus on trying to make a film that in this environment made sense financially and creatively, whereas I was just going creatively for what I wanted to do because I knew it would sell, and I had offers before the film was finished, but then they didn't materialize, because when I finished the film and it was ready for sale, it was we were into 09, and that was not a happy time. So that's how I do it differently today.
Oh, well, just speaking of cast, I mean, you've got some great faces in there, I wonder whether you could talk a bit about them, starting with Michael Rooker. And where was your idea for his character? Where did that come from?
It came about kind of, he originally wasn't in the script, the first draft. And then it came about of we got to a point where needed to probably, because I can make the film and that's great, but I really wanted to make it saleable in foreign territories, and I needed to get your Tony Todds and these people in, and I realized I needed another name. Michael Madsen was attached, and he was going to play that role originally, but he dropped out at the last minute. And Michael Rooker had originally, or not auditioned, but applied for the role of that Graham McTavish or Jeeves played. And he passed him for that role. But then immediately I was like, well, shit, maybe he wants to do this role. And I kind of wrote it in with him in mind to play that character, and big juiced it up for him. And and he sent him the new script, and he obviously liked it enough to come on board and play that role. So I kind of almost wrote it for him, really.
Well, how much did he? How much of his input was into that character? I mean, he seemed a little strange in the whole film.
So I mean, he gave it a really interesting kind of attitude, I guess. Almost not comedic, but let's say fair, or normalcy to the kind of job that he does. And it gave a nice spin on a kind of a hitman for hire character. So that was kind of his doing. It was meant to be a dark character, but he played it with Rooker-esque, as I say, which was great. And I know he just won him at some blood fest in Melbourne. Won him Best Supporting Actor, I think, just like last week. So it obviously worked.
The inaugural Bloodfest Fantastique, yes.
Oh yes.
But you've also got Tony Todd in there. Can you tell us about?
Yeah, that was another decision I wanted to get. I considered him at the time kind of a tentpole horror actor. Obviously, drooled over him as a horror fan over the years, and I was in a position where I raised the money for the film. I'm the producer, I'm the writer, the director, and I had other producers too. But I was the guy who kind of brought the money on, and I was like, who would I want to work with? Who do I want to meet, really? Yeah. Work with. And he was, number one on my list. And luckily, he was available. It wasn't there. He's got a small role in the film. We actually just shot him out in a day. So, we squeezed him in between other projects, and so that was great, And so, and then obviously Jimmy Duvall was the same thing, and Jason Connery, and there's a couple, and Mario Delfino. She was in Jeepers Creepers, but she auditioned for that role. I didn't go after her for that. She came in, auditioned, and it was like, wow, there she is.
Yeah.
So
yeah, she's great in it. She's really good in it. So, as the producer, how much did it cost to make? Can you tell us that?
Let's say quite a lot, but I don't know how to answer that question these days.
Well, you're in the black now. I mean,
Well, not quite, because I was going to sell the film for a profit, right up front to one person, which was the whole idea before, and then the crash happened. So still not there yet, but getting closer every day. So it's it's a brutal business, this industry, and that's why I do things differently today in terms of the style of movie. In fact, my next film is more of a thriller-esque film, without hardcore violence, but still has plenty of shocks and blood and guts, but no labia removal or testicle removals in this one. So,
and what about the special effects? There's a lot of body parts floating around.
Yeah, I mean, we try to keep it simple, and a lot of the violence we don't really. I try not to show it as such, with for example. Graham McTavish removes his testicles, and I don't show the nuts and bolts of that, but I do show the after effects. So that literally, when he does it, the camera's below his waist, and you see him, cutting, and you hear it. You see blood spurting up, and then we literally, if you look at the making of behind the scenes, you literally see people. They're all underneath the camera line with syringes with blood and these testicles. They're holding onto it, these straggly lines and veins, and so he pulls them up all blooded, and so that's really all you see. And the same with the female genitalia mutilation. Same thing. You don't really see anything. All you see is a bit of skin coming away and going into a jar. So I like to leave that part up to the imagination, because to show would just be disgusting and unnecessary, especially something like that. So I'll leave. So I just show enough to make it disgusting and unnecessary as it is, but without it being any more disgusting and unnecessary. If you know what I mean.
Oh, it's a truly emotional. It's a moment of real feeling, especially.
Well, yeah. I mean, really, with that, both those scenes, those are the ones I wanted people just to be literally. In fact, when I had screenings of this, when I've seen it in the theater, I mean, people walk out. In fact, I had Ryan Rotten from Shock Till You Drop, one of the American, like the website, the horror website.
Yeah.
He was at the screening, and he came up to me afterwards, and he said, "I just came from a screening of Last House on the Left, and congratulations, more people walked out of your movie than they did of Last House on the Left." And I was like, you know what? That's good, because that's what I was kind of after. That shock, not shock value, but And some people aren't ready for the film, and those are kind of the people who are like, I wasn't ready for that, and they're the people who leave. But I made it for the hardcore kind of horror fans, and from what I've seen and heard, and they lap this stuff up, and they as part of their experience of this film is to get to that point where they're like, oh my, looking away, oh my god. That's what when I was a kid and I watched films like The Exorcist or Nightmare on Elm Street, I had to look away, or even Doctor Who when I was like 5 years old, couch behind the couch, or a pillow over the face, that's kind of the whole thing I was going for here. But today, you have to do that kind of thing to get that effect these days, So I don't know in 10 years what it's going to be like, but that's what it's like.
I think it'll be a permanent effect, I think. Anything make you laugh on set?
There was one thing in particular, and unfortunately, I didn't catch this particular moment on camera, but I caught right afterwards, and you can kind of see it in the making of. So it goes back to the testicle scene when Graham McTavish literally cuts up his testicles. When I'm writing this stuff, I purposefully, as I said, sat down and thought, okay, I'm going to write the most horrendous scene here, and I'm visualizing it, and I'm okay. This is what he does, and okay, so I write it. I don't know who's acting in it. I don't know how it's going to look, where the location is, or anything. So and so anyway, we get on set, and we only have 2 takes for this because we've only got 2 testicles. So 2 sets of testicles. So first take. And, it's a 4-minute scene in 1 take, and it culminates in him doing his testicles. So he's got to get it spot on, and if he gets to the point where he does the removal, then that's got to be absolutely spot on as well. So, watching the scene, he's all serious. It's the first take is the one that's in the movie. So, so he's there doing his, chat to camera and he's confessing his sins, and then he, takes a moment and reaches over and gets his rubber and does his testicles. And at this point, I'm like, ooh, and then he gets, anyway, we set it up and bulked it and framed it and whatever. And so, anyway, and then he gets his knife and does this, and the blood spurt. And I'm watching it just off camera on a monitor.
Yeah.
And so I can see what it ultimately looks like. And I'm like, oh my God. And I start sort of gagging with like joy that this looks so good. And everything I'm looking at is coming out. And then he starts, slippery testicles in hand, pulling them above camera, and I just lose it. I literally I'm by myself. There's a couple of people behind me and around me, but I'm absolutely barely can contain myself. And unfortunately, he can see me standing at the monitor out of the corner. He's aware of me in the monitor, and I'm like, I'm in pieces, because what I'm seeing on screen is 10 times worse than what I'd written or ever imagined. And so it's just a piece of beautiful art that is 10 times better. So I'm in heaven, like, this is the effect that I was going for, but it's even better. So I was literally I was in tears of laughter. And then I have to actually get up and I have to walk away from this whole thing, because I was literally going to laugh and ruin the scene. And so he said afterwards he saw me walk away at one point, and I said, yeah, I was about to ruin everything. So so that was the funniest, literally the funniest moment on set for me. And everything else was, there was some banter and fun stuff that went on as well. But that was, categorically the moment that was the funniest for me.
I was going to ask you what you thought you achieved with Penance, and I mean, gagging with joy, that is something else, That's an achievement.
As a filmmaker.
That's something to be really proud of, Jake, I reckon. That's great. How would you just generally describe Penance to horror fans?
I would kind of call it what I've said in the past, it's kind of like a journey of innocence into a world of fear and dread but you know, even though it's got strippers in, it definitely doesn't have a happy ending. So that's kind of, you know, what I say. It's you know, it's innocently, you know, classic case of a normal girl going into a world she doesn't know, and a world is literally turned upside down, and it becomes a very nasty place for her. And you know, ultimately she comes out a different person at the end of the experience. You know, so that's what kind of how I describe it to people.
Like to let us in on what your immediate plans for the future are? You've mentioned another film that you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty hard to, you know, in this industry, like nobody's rushed to hire me. You know, that's, you know, I'm over those expectations. A lot of people, when they start out, you know, make a short film, and if it's any good, they think that they're gonna. And you know, this because this kind of stuff does happen, particularly in this town. You know, people will be knocking on their door to hire them to shoot the next, you know, Saw or something, and you know, that just doesn't really happen unless timing, the right movie gets into the right person's hands, you know, the right people, you got the right agent. You know, it's got to be an alignment of the stars, and that happens. You know, it's like lightning in a bottle. But you, excuse me, you still read about these things happening, and that's what we all hope to happen to us, and that's what we all strive towards. You know, the actor that gets discovered after, you know, the first audition, or you know, the filmmaker who gets makes a short and gets launched thrown in straight into this film. But you know, there's usually a lot more that goes to it, or is to it, than that. So nobody hired me right after this movie. So you know, it's about, okay, if I want to keep working, I've got to keep writing and keep looking to produce my own material, because no one else is doing it right now. So so the next film is more of a thriller. Again, you know, it's something that it can be achieved on a low budget. You know, one location, back to sort of Days of Darkness stuff, one location, handful of actors. But really what I'm going for is going back to kind of my roots, what I think I'm particularly good at, which I achieved to a certain degree in Penance, but absolutely more so in Days of Darkness. Sorry, not Days of Darkness, in We All Fall Down. It was, you know, that was a ghost story. I don't know if you saw that, but it was really creepy, fear and dread, and impending doom, and suspense and terror, really. And you know, I try to infuse suspense and terror into Penance, but I kind of want to do that, but in a thriller slash, you know, action thriller suspense film, kind of like. So my next film is kind of like The Strangers. That's kind of, you know, that tone. But it's a cross between The Strangers and Memento. So the film plays out kind of backwards through a device that, you know, it's a memory device. You know, like in Memento, he's got a short-term memory. It's a similar kind of idea, but in a house, it's a cat and mouse between an attacker and a woman. And yeah, so that's, so you know, I'm trying to raise the features for that, for the money for that, and I had it almost off the ground I was 5 days from shooting, and I had Danny Trejo attached to play the bad guy, and he was flying up to Oregon where I was shooting it, and well, he wasn't. He was trying to get the flights, the tickets, and everything, but money fell through, so the whole project fell through. So I went back to kind of square one, and I used these. There's websites right now you may have heard of, either Kickstarter or Kickstarter.com or Indiegogo. They both serve two different purposes, but I was trying to raise money on Kickstarter. It's an all or nothing website. You know, in this instance, I was trying to raise, I think, $100,000. Okay, because I'm shooting in one location, much simpler than Penance, and you know, the simplest kind of movie I've shot so far. And but if I don't reach my goal of 100 grand, nobody's credit cards get charged. The film doesn't get made. So I tried to do that, but that didn't work. So then I raised money for a short film, which is going to be like, you know, here's what the film will look like or be like. And I raised, you know, like $4.5 grand on Indiegogo, and you get to keep all the money even if you don't raise the dollar amount you set yourself. So it's a really good tool, and you know, really good for filmmakers. So I used that, raised $4.5 grand, and then used that to shoot, you know, kind of almost like an extended trailer for the film, which I've just finished editing last week, and I'm in the process of sound and all that stuff right now. So I'll have that ready in a couple of months, and then I'm going to take that out to you know, do the classic, this is what it's going to look like, here's the package. I've got distributors now, you know, international, that can help me and do it that way, you know.
Is that what you?
So that's kind of the.
Just rewinding a little bit, you did mention that you do some film schooling in Australia, and if so, where?
Yeah, well, it was this tiny little kind of out of the basement of Sydney University, UBS, um, and you know, I just heard about it. It was relatively cheap. It was like 6 or 8 weeks, and I felt that's kind of what I needed to get me some information, knowledge, and experience, and you know, it turned out to be a good thing. And then I, you know, did the whole, bought the Mac, bought the camera, Final Cut Pro, and just started, you know, cranking out short films. And you know, that's how I cut my teeth. You know, understanding shots, composition, script writing, you know, all the basics. And then I went to film school here in LA. I kind of moved here to go to film school here, and went through that process to learn how to, you know, basically to network and see how it's all done over here, and then, you know, went forward from there. So yeah, I've had some, you know, schooling. It helped, of course, and you know, you just got to get out there and do it once you got the basic knowledge, and you know what direction you're going.
Any plans to come back to Australia, do some films?
Well, of course, if invited, or if the project takes me there, then definitely. But you know, in terms of trying to shoot the stuff I'm shooting, it doesn't make sense for me right now. You know, when I get to the, you know, $2-3 million budget and the incentives are there and it makes sense, and or the film's set in Australia, or I can shoot it in Sydney for another city. You know, that only happens when you get to the next kind of the big, you know, multi-million-dollar level, because it's cheaper to shoot in Sydney. And as far as I understand, unless it's changed in the last sort of year and a half to 2 years, Sydney still, or Australia / New South Wales, Sydney still offer various incentives. So, you know, it makes sense to maybe shoot movies there. But so not right now, not for me, unless you know, someone or some project falls my way or comes my way that takes me there. So no plans right now. But that's not to say I'm not going to come back for another holiday. I think we got one planned at the end of the year. So.
Oh, we might see you in person, Jake, hey?
Maybe, indeed.
Just to wrap up here, any final words about Penance that you'd like people to know about Penance, especially the horror fans?
Yeah, I don't think there's a film that's kind of like this. I mean, there are other films that obviously I borrowed from. You know, it's kind of a bit like Hostel, a bit like Blair Witch, a bit like you know, films like that. But it's definitely unique, and I think if you are squirmish and enjoy that experience, then this film's for you.
That's great. Well, you know, all the best to you, and you know, I hope you can hold on to your crown of the king of genital mutilation movies for the moment, eh?
Well, I didn't know there was even competition for the crown. I didn't think there's not that many movies. I don't think. Well, I know that there's a couple certainly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I may have the crown right now. I don't know if that's such a good crown to be holding. I'll take it right now. At least it's a crown, right?
That's right. All right, Jack. Thanks a lot for your time, mate.
All right, Michael.
Okay.